Smithscript weapons are a very special breed of weapons in Elden Ring. Not only do they come with a series of very strong ranged attacks, but their intelligence as well as faith scaling affinities also further scale the physical damage on the weapons themselves, which makes in turn this reach some of the highest attack rating in the entire game. Now, they aren't completely perfect, but you can definitely reach some interesting results with some proper setups, which is why we're going to go over all of the Smithscript weapons, how to find them, how to make the most out of it, and why I believe they are some of the most special new items added in Shadow of the Erdtree. So what exactly makes these weapons so unique? I mean, at the end of the day, you can't really imbue them at all, neither with Ashes of War like Flame Spear, Flame Skewer, even Blood Flame Blade, nor with Greases or anything of sorts. And the reason for that is because it actually has that off limit so that it gets majority of its buff from the faith or intelligence scaling affinities. Specifically, magic, flame art, and sacred are its best affinities, both in the fire and magic damage that it gets, depending if you invest into intelligence or in faith, but also that they affect the physical damage, making this useful both for faith-based builds as well as intelligence-based builds, as you're going to increase its physical damage too. So just to give you an example, at 25 faith, our physical damage on the Greathammer, for example, is 266 plus 152. And of course, we also have the fire damage. If we pump that to 65 faith, you will see that our fire damage also increases correspondingly. But if you look at the physical damage, it also got a buff. So now it is 266 plus 240, which is what makes these weapons so unique. Something like the Fire Knight's Great Sword, which can similarly be built with a Flame Art, does not get any physical bonus damage if you pump more points into Faith. That's because this is unique only to the Smithscript weapons. So the Great Hammer, the daggers, the chakram, also of course that spear, and even the axe all get the same extra scaling that no other weapon in the game has, which is what's going to make them reach higher ARs than any other weapon in the DLC. Even compared to the Fire Knight's Greatsword, you're getting actually an extra 10 to 15% AR increase, which can actually mean quite a lot of damage. And this, by the way, also works with intelligence-based builds. You can go with a magic affinity instead and still get the physical bonus needed, even if you go fully invested in intelligence. So you can actually make a much better battle mage than you ever did up until this point. Now, of course, this is not the only advantage that you get with these weapons. You also get the throwable component. And in my opinion, the Greathammer and the Chakram have two of the best throwable mechanics for all of the Smithscript weapons. So let's start with the Greathammer. You kind of have two options to use this. You can either do a charge or you can do a running heavy attack. And the charge attack is of course going to be the highest damage. You're going to spin a few times and then unleash that Thor hammer, dealing tons of damage and having a very good range. Now, this is not going to have anything but damage fall off, so you're only going to suffer a bit of damage if the target is too far away, and I mean very far away. But it doesn't have any damage penalties as it's passing through different enemies. So if you line up like 5 enemies, you're going to have the same damage passing through all of them. Maybe even a bit higher, because it seems that a bit medium to longer range is the sweet spot for the damage. Another option with this is to do a running throw attack, which you do by just, well, running and then tapping R2. You're going to unleash a much faster throw attack, which is not going to deal as much damage, but it's pretty good at interrupting enemies as you're making your way towards them, or if you want a bit of extra damage but don't have too long of a window of opportunity. So this can be a good way to then follow up with a big attack, maybe an Ash of War like a Lion's Claw, or maybe even a Prayerful Strike, both of which, by the way, on the Greathammer work really great. Now, the downside obviously is that the weapon is not too long compared to something like, for example, the Colossal Sword, so you're kind of losing a bit on that if you're using something like the Lion's Claw. You're going to need to be much closer to the boss, but you can use a Prayerful Strike, which in my opinion is the best option for this, and also heal up a ton as you're trading blows with the enemy. And I'm saying the, well, Prayerful Strike, but in that case you would go with the Sacred Affinity. Yes, that's going to be slightly behind the Flame Art, but in the case of this weapon, it makes up for the fact that you can face tank things for a lot longer. Again, it's going to be dependent on your preference. Flame Art is going to be the highest damage, but you do have a few trade-offs. Now that Chakram is going to be, in my opinion, the best option, and I'm saying that because this is going to have some nice series of attacks. It actually has 4 types of ranged attacks. So you have the running attack, which is super quick. Then you have the regular tap R2s, which is basically just throwing chakrams and kind of using them as a medium ranged weapons. Then you have the charged R2, which basically has a follow-up. This is going to deal the highest damage, but has the longest window of charge up. And then finally, we have the jump R2, which is basically going to almost start a 4 series attack hits. If you angle this properly, you can hit the enemy both with the physical close-up component, and then the chakrams will also kind of track into the target. And speaking of the tracking, the chakram actually manages to circle around and hit targets at almost impossible angles. Even if you are too close to the target, more often than not, you're still going to see them kind of circling back and still hitting the target no matter what and no matter how mobile it is. I even tested this against Renala and it's behaving really well. But really what makes the Chakram so great is that if you use a Flame Art, which by the way is the best option for it, you're going to deal the highest amount of damage by far. First of all, your ranged jump attacks, which is what I recommend always using against trash mobs, are going to, well, just completely one-shot them. That's basically it. Or well, in this case, 2-shot if you also dual wield them. As far as Ashes of War that I would recommend for the Chakrams, obviously Swift Slash or Blind Spot are going to be your best options. I slightly prefer the Swift Slash just because I like the gap closer and like just the range of it. You can more easily get in enemies' range. But Blind Spot is just as good. You just have some iframes at the start and the low stance are going to protect you against many incoming attacks. But both of them kind of cost a lot of stamina, so a 2-headed Turtle Talisman is what I recommend with a build that uses this. Now, besides this, we also have the spear as well as the shield. And what I like about this is that you can actually use them both as ranged weapons as you have them equipped at the same time. So with L2, you can unleash a quick, disc throw and then press R2 immediately and also unleash that spear throw, which can deal some pretty respectable damage. You can also then use them in close range to basically protect yourself and follow up with some riposte strikes. So your 2 best options are going to be either that Impaling Thrust, but I personally prefer Ice Spear. I think that this would better suit a magic build going full on intelligence. You can also go with like the Frost Affinity. You are losing a bit in terms of AR as it's not as good as the magic scaling, even if you have the same points in intelligence, but you do have some very good actual ranged damage. Plus, of course, you still have the spear and the shield and can use it in conjunction to protect yourself, also riposte, do some stuns, and when needed, follow up with some ranged attacks. Your biggest, of course, advantage of the spear is that it's basically unlimited use. You have ranged attacks. Your damage fall off is going to be much bigger than the one on the Greathammer, so you do have to stay closer to the target, but it's especially useful if you're on horseback. I believe it's the only one that can be used on horseback and kind of throw it at enemies without having to dismount. Now, one we haven't talked about is the axe. This can also be used in a similar way to the spear, as in a shield in one hand, and then in the other hand you can also use this at a pretty respectable range. And you can also use the Stormcaller Ash of War and just go on an intelligence battle mage build, maybe with even a Frost Affinity, as it's pretty good at stacking that up. Of course, your range is going to be limited if you're using the Stormcaller, but like I said, you're going to have a Smithscript weapon, so you're going to have that range throwable component. Still, the damage on it seems to be pretty good. So let's go over how you can get all these weapons and set yourself up with a build around them. So you're going to find both that Greathammer as well as the shield at the Tailu Ruined Forge right here, a little bit up north from the Ancient Ruins base. Very easy to reach over there, so once you're inside, you're just going to want to take it to the left and then follow this route further a bit downstairs and go pretty much past this gap at the end of it, which eventually is going to let you jump on the big drill slash pipe. And then you can jump over it on the other side in front of you, and then just look to your left again. It's going to be right next to some of these collapsed walls. For the axe, you can actually jump again over the grill back at the starting balcony you've been on, and then just progress in the room ahead. Go slightly to your right, and in the back of it, behind an enemy, you're going to also find the axe. If you also want that shield, just go up this, pipe again, all the way at the end, and make your way to the back end room. You will find the shield at the top of that platform to the right, and you can use some of these collapsed pillars to make your way over there. Now for the spear as well as the chakram, you can again head over to the ruined forge of Starfall Past. It's the same one that also gave us that really awesome volcanic greatsword. So you're going to find the spear pretty much within the first room. Just make your way over this bridge and then go to the right side. You're going to find it upon this corpse and you can get that spear right away. For the chakram, you just have to progress all the way at the end of the dungeon and specifically to this second lever that pulls down the wall that previously brought us to the volcanic greatsword. Go past it into the final room and past these two enemies. You're going to find it right here upon this corpse. Oh, and by the way, you can also get that smithing talisman within this very dungeon. It's going to be inside of this room that you can reach. It's the one that also gets filled with a ton of blob enemies. You're going to again find the corpse in the back of the room. Just get it and it's now pretty much yours. And the best part is that these weapons also come with a talisman. So there's a talisman that actually buffs your weapon throwing attacks by about 10%. That's going to be the smithing talisman that we're going to get from the ruined forge Starfall in just a little bit. But this can actually buff that damage for quite a bit. You can of course also go with a bunch of others, like for example the axe talisman, since this is going to be a charged attack. Also, after some testing, it seems that the two-handed talisman also works on the ranged attack component of the Greathammer. If you dual hand this and then throw it, it's going to take that extra like 15% damage increase into account and you're going to notice some really big difference. That is why getting all of these charms, including like the Fire Scorpion, if you're going with like the Flame Art Affinity, are going to buff the damage to such high levels. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know down below, have you used the Smithscript weapons? Do you like them? Do you find them useful in your journey? Let me know down below in the comments. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.